Howdy, howdy, howdy. Today, this is True Crime Lounge, and we are finishing up our Charles Manson series. I know I'm sad to see it come to an end, but don't know which one I'm going to start with next yet, so I'm working on that one because I have a couple of more series lined up I want to do. So, shall we move on to our finale of the Charles Manson series? Alright. Before I continue, I want you to hit that like button, comment someone you want me to talk about next, ring that bell for notifications, and hit that subscribe button. Now, let's continue with the aftermath. On the day of verdicts recommending the death penalty were returned, news came that the badly decomposed body of Ronald Hughes had been found wedged between two boulders in Ventura County. It is rumored, although never proven, that Hughes was murdered by the family because he had stood up to Manson and refused to allow Van Houten to take the stand and absolve Manson of all the crimes. Though he might have perished to the flooding, family member Sandra Good stated that Hughes was the first of the retaliation members. On November 8th of 1972, the body of 26-year-old Vietnam Marine combat James L.T. Willett was found in a hiker near Gordonsville, California. Months earlier, he had been forced to dig his own grave, and then he was shot and poorly buried. His body was found on the first hand, protruding from the grave, and had been, on the other hand, missing, likely because of scavenging animals. His station wagon was found outside of his house in Stockton, where several of Manson's followers were living, including Priscilla Cooper, Lynette Squeaky Farm, and Nancy Pittman. Police forced their way into the house and arrested several of the people along with Fromm, who called him after they had arrived. In the body of James Willett of 19-year-old wife Lauren Rennie Chevelle. Olmsted Willett was found, man, that's a mouthful, was found buried in the basement. She had been killed recently by a gunshot in the head, and the family's members initially claimed it was an accident. It was later suggested that she was killed out of fear that she would reveal who killed her husband. As discovery of the body became prominent news, the Willett's infant daughter was found alive in the house. Michael Montfort pled guilty to murdering Rennie Willett, and Priscilla Cooper, James Craig, and Nancy Pittman pled guilty to accessory after the fact. Montfort and William Goucher later pled to the murder of James Willett, and James Craig pled guilty in accessory after that. The group had been living in a house with the Willets while committing various robberies. Shortly after killing Willett, Montfort had used Willett's identification papers and posed as Willett after being arrested in an armed robbery in a liquor store. News reports suggested that James Willett was not involved in the robberies and wanted to move away, and was killed in the fear he would talk to the police. After leaving the Marines, following 2 tours in Vietnam, Willett had been in an ESL teaching for immigrant children. Protracted proceedings extradite Watson in his native Texas, where he had resettled a month before his arrest. Resulted in which was tried separately, a trial commenced August 1971. By October, he too had been found guilty on 7 counts of murder and 1 conspiracy. Unlike the others, Watson had presented a psychiatric defense. Prosecutor Vincent Bolowski had made a short drive to the Watson's and Sandy claims, short work of the Watson's and Sandy claims. Like his co-conspirator, Watson was sentenced to death. In February 1972, the death sentences of 5 parties was automatically reduced to life in prison by California versus Anderson, in which California Supreme Court abolished the death penalty in that state. After the return, Manson rhetoric and hippie speeches were not accepted. Though he was eventually found temporary acceptance from the Aryan Brotherhood, his role was submissive to a sexually aggressive member of the group in San Quentin. In 1971, the trial took place after his Tate LaBianca convictions. Manson was found guilty of the murders of Gary Hinman and Donald Shorty Shea and was given life sentence. Shea was a Spawn Ranch stuntman and horse wrangler who had been killed approximately 10 days after the August 16, 1969 sheriff's raid on the ranch. Manson, who suspected that Shea helped the raid, had apparently believed Shea was trying to get Spawn to run the family off the ranch. Manson had considered a sin that the white Shea had married a black woman, and there was a possibility that Shea knew about the Tate LaBianca killings. In a separate trial, Manson family members Bruce Davis and Steve Clem Grogan were also found guilty of Shea murders. Before the conclusion of the Manson-Tate LaBianca murders, a reporter for the Los Angeles Times tracked down the Manson murderers, remarried the living of the Pacific Northwest. The former Kathleen Maddox claimed in the childhood that the son suffered no neglect, as he would even been pampered by all women who surrounded him. Remaining in view. On September 5, 1975, the Mansons rocketed back to national attention from Squeaky Fromm and attempted to assassinate U.S. President Gerald Ford. The attempt took place in Sacramento, to which she and Manson follower Sandra Good moved near Manson and was incarcerated at Folsom State Prison. A secret search in the apartment from Good had turned up evidence that coupled with later actions of the part of the Good resulted in the Good conviction for conspiring to send threatening communications through the U.S. mail and transmitting death by the way of the interstate commerce. Fromm was sentenced to 15 years in life, becoming one of the first person sentenced under the U.S. Code Title 18, Chapter 84, 1965, which made it a federal crime to attempt to assassinate President in the United States. So, wasn't a federal crime beforehand? Odd, but okay. In 1977, authorities learned that the precise location of the remains of Shorty Shea, that contrary to the family claims, she had been dismembered and buried in several places. Contacting the prosecutors to his death, Steve Gorhan told Shea's corpse that he had been buried and drew a map, which was covered of one of those convicted Manson murders. Grogan would become, in 1985, the first, and as of 2009, the only to be paroled. In the 1980s, Manson gave 3 notable interviews. The first recorded at the California Medical Facility, and aired June 13, 1981, was with Tom Snyder of NBC's The Tomorrow Show. The second was of the San Quentin prison, which aired in March 7, 1986, with Charlie Rose from CBS News Night Watch. It won the news for an Emmy Award for the Best Interview in 1987. The last with Gerald Rivera in 1968 and was part of the journalist prime time special on Satanism. At least, as early members of the Snyder Interview, Manson's forehead bore a swastika and a spot of an X carved during a trial. In 1989, Nicholas Schreck conducted an interview of Manson. During the interview of materials in the documentary Charles Manson Superstar. This was the first of its and is considered one of the most authoritative and comprehensive documentaries of the subject. Schreck concluded that the story behind the murders was possibly false, and that he admitted plan was the women of the ranch interview concluded involved killing one of the Tate homes in order to free Bobby Basile. As per an attempt of a copycat murder of Gary Hinman, according to this, used the writing of blood of the Tate and LaBianca residents were merely a ploy to make it seem like the murder of Hinman was still free, and that Basile was not guilty. Key in refutation of in this hypothesis in the fact that prosecution attempted to show Manson ordered the killings because he was upset over Terry Melcher. And this could not have been the case, as Manson attempted on several occasions to contact Melcher at his new address, and he was showing he knew Melcher no longer lived at the Tate home. Schreck also concluded that Manson was not only insane but merely acting out of frustration. On September 25, 1984, while in prison in California Medical Facility at Vacaville, Manson was severely burnt by a fellow inmate who poured paint thinner on him and set him alight. That's not funny. That's not funny. That's not funny. The other prisoner Jan Holstrom, explained that Manson objected to his Hare Krishna chants and verbally threatened him despite suffering second and third degree burns over 20% of his body. Manson recovered from the injuries. In December 1987, from serving a life sentence from the assassination attempt, escaped briefly from Alderson prison camp in West Virginia. She was trying to reach Manson, who she had heard had testicular cancer, and was apprehended within days. She was released on parole from the Federal Medical Center, Carswell, on August 14, 2009. So what about the later events? Well, in a 1994 conversation with the prosecutor Vincent Volosi, Catherine Shearer, a one-time Manson follower, stated that the testimony of the penalty phase of Manson had been fabricated, intended to save Manson from the gas chamber, and had been given to Manson's explicit direction. Shearer's testimony had introduced a copycat motive, which testimony of 3 female defendants echoed, and according to the Tate LaBianca murders, have been Linda Cassian's. In a 1997 segment, the tabloid television program Hard Copy, Shearer implied her testimony had been given to Manson in the threat of physical harm in August 1971 after Manson's trial and sentencing. Shearer had participated in a violent California retail robbery in which the object was for the weapons to free Manson. In January 1996, Manson's website was established by a Latter-day Manson follower, George Stimson, who helped with Sandra Good. Good was released from prison in 1985, and after serving 10 years of her 15-year sentence for threats, the Manson website, atwa.com, was discontinued in 2001. In June 1997, Manson was found of his had been trafficking drugs in prison disciplinary committee. That August, he was moved to Cochran State Prison, from Cochran State Prison to Pelican Bay State Prison. In a 1998-1999 interview in Seconds magazine, Bobby Bustle rejected the view that Manson ordered they kill Gary Hinman. He stated that Manson did come to Hinman house and slash Hinman with a sword. In a 1981 interview with We magazine, he denied this. Bustle also stated that he read about the Tate murders in a newspaper. I wasn't even sure at this point. Really, I had no idea that it had been done. So, in recent developments, though, in January 28th segment of Discovery Channel's Most Evil, Barbara Holt That is it. I will see y'all next time with a new series.